join our organization, go to blackwomenforpositivechange.org, sign up. We have the most affordable dues in the country, $75 a year. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So please join us, sign up, and help us accomplish these two missions: entrepreneurship and wealth building, and changing the culture of violence. So with that, I was hoping our chaplain would be on, Reverend Reynolds, because we usually like to start off this meeting with a prayer, but she's not on with us right now. Lisa, would you feel comfortable starting off our meeting with a prayer this evening?
We'll do. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful. Kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your spirit and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Amen. In a non-full way.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our chairperson of coalitions. This is a dynamic woman from Baltimore, Maryland, and she is involved in politics, whether it's standing on a street corner holding a sign for Joe Biden, or raising money and writing her own checks, or having her sons and daughters, her grandkids, all involved in supporting what we do. So Danielle Smith is a real example of how you can be an advocate, and you don't have to be in the US Congress or the Senate or the State Assembly. You can be an activist right where you are, right out of your own house. So with that, I introduce Danielle Smith, who will introduce our very special guest. Thank you, Danielle.
Well, thank you for that great opening there. And I like to get to meet that young lady one day. So good evening, everyone. I'm going to introduce Congresswoman Lucy McBath, also my soror, and we have a couple of other sorors here on the phone tonight. I'm going to read the bio, but what I want to say, when Dr. Myers was talking about standing on the corners, I remember at that first gun rights, what was it? Not a gun rights, not meeting, a parade that they had. What was it? Gun violence. And we stood up there and we were holding up the signs. And Lucy was talking about what she wanted to do and making change. And the sign said something about, if you can't make the change, be the change. And I keep thinking about that every time I see you, Lucy, and I'm just so happy and excited for you. And you actually did it, and you ran for Congress. And I know I probably drove you crazy, like we were like just the best buddies in the world when we met that day, and we were doing a lot that day, but I called her on the night she won, and I was sending a text message, and I was just so overjoyed and excited. And just what you did is what a lot of us need to do. And sometimes it takes obstacles in our lives and different hurdles and different things. They give us that passion to move on. And you are just one of the most passionate individuals that I know doing this. So thank you so much for everything that you do. So now I'm going with the regular professional introduction. Okay, so the most important title that Congresswoman Lucy McBath will ever hold is mom. Lucy is the mother of Jordan Davis, and Lucy considers being Jordan's mom as the most important role she will ever have. In 2012, Lucy's son Jordan was senselessly shot and killed at a gas station in Jacksonville, Florida, by a man objecting to music Jordan was playing in his car. Lucy left her 30-year-long career working for Delta Airlines for her second career focused on reform to make our communities safer for every single American. After the murder of her son, Lucy spoke out. She began demanding that the clergy, our politicians, and other elected leaders do more to stop the senseless gun violence in America. She began working for Everytown for gun safety and Moms Demand Action, traveling throughout the country, speaking and lobbying lawmakers, activists, and organizers. After the tragic shooting in Parkland, Florida, Lucy watched as our leaders promised to take action. Politicians of all parties, including the president, promised they would take action, yet nothing came. Then Lucy decided that if our leaders would not change our laws to save lives, she would stand up and run for the office herself, and that she did. She ran against an NRA-backed incumbent and won by 1.5 points. Now, Congresswoman McBath is proud to hold the seat once held by Newt Gingrich. And you know that was a task in itself, you guys. Lucy's work in Congress has been focused on working across the aisle and passing laws to help our children and families. She is proud to have worked on numerous pieces of legislation which have been passed through the House, including universal background checks for all gun sales and red flag laws to limit access to firearms for those who are potentially dangerous. Lucy has also sponsored legislation protecting our veterans, which was signed into law. Prior to serving in Congress, Lucy created the Champion in the Making Legacy Foundation, which provides charitable and educational assistance to graduating high school students attending traditional and technical colleges. She is an active member of Eagles Nest Church in Roswell, and she is also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and Marietta Roswell Alumni Chapter. Lucy received her BA in political science from Virginia State University in 1982. She enjoys spending time motorcycling and walking her dog, Harley. I give to you all, Congresswoman Lucy McBath.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I just want to thank, I wrote all your names down here because I wanted to just thank you all. The Black Women for Positive Change. Thank each and every one of you. Thank all the board members that are here tonight. Thank you so much for the members. And yes, I want to thank my moms, Demand Action, that I see there in their red shirts as always. I'm so happy to see them. They are so just such a part of my life. But thank you to each and every one of you that are here tonight. Thank you for asking me to speak with you. I'm more than happy to do so because, you know, we are in times such as this. And as women, we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can do to uplift our communities and our families and for positive change. I just want to talk to you a little bit tonight about just what has been happening in Washington, the work that I've been doing in Washington, but just really wanting to encourage each and every one of you to be completely engaged as you are, and just really understanding that, you know, time is of the essence and we do not have time to waste. Each and every day, as we can see, even though we don't have the Trump administration any longer in the White House, Trumpism still exists. And the assault that we've had on, you know, just our way of life, our democracy, our politics, you know, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government are still under assault, even though he's not physically here. And we are at a time where we are going to have to make sure that these next elections will be so extremely crucial, because with redistricting, you know, there has been great undercounting in the country. And of course, we know that means that, you know, that's a defining way for us to determine what benefits communities receive across the country, the politics of the country. And we are at a defining moment where we will definitely need to make sure that we're standing up and exercising our ability to create this positive change, because we are on the tipping point at this time. As it was said in my bio, you know, I came to this work. I came to Washington as probably one of the most unorthodox ways ever. I don't ever believe in the history of Congress. There, a person has come by way of being a flight attendant and then a gun safety advocate, and then of course into Congress. But I do know that, as was mentioned earlier, that, you know, sometimes God allows things to happen, and everything that has happened in my life has prepared me for the work that I do now. And I really believe that I'm doing what I was called to do, what I was born to do. But once I lost my son, Jordan, as it was stated, you know, I just felt extremely, extremely restless, as if I felt like God was calling me to do something else. I come from a civil rights background. My father was Illinois branch president of the NAACP, served on the executive board for over 25 years. I traveled all around the state of Illinois with my mom and dad as we were in the marches and the rallies and watching my father give speeches around the state of Illinois. I have a picture of my father sitting next to President Lyndon Baines Johnson at the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So yes, this is in my blood. And a lot of the work that I do, I really believe, is because of the way that I was raised, being engaged and caring about my community. So with the death of Jordan, I was just completely floored, because I couldn't understand how I just watched what happened with Trayvon Martin. Now I too was dealing with the same kind of tragic, horrific murder of my son. I didn't understand anything about just the horrific gun laws, the horrific gun culture that we had until Trayvon Martin's killing, until my son's killing. And ever since then, I've been giving my life to the cause of keeping everyone safe and reducing violence, in particular in communities of color. Have worked very diligently, was working on federal background checks for all gun sales and closing the Charleston loophole even before I came to Washington. Spent time lobbying the very people that I work now as my colleagues, lobbying them in Washington, going to the committee bill markup, sitting there and watching time and time again as gun safety legislation was not being enacted. It was with the President Trump, when he said, you know, we don't need to be afraid of the NRA gun lobby. We need to have federal background checks for all gun sales. I thought, well, something was going to be done. And within 24 hours, President Trump flipped because of the extreme pressure and lobbying efforts of the NRA gun lobby, who also spent well over $30 million putting him in office. So I decided that I was going to run to champion gun safety because I didn't want anyone to be me. And so since I've been in Washington, I am one of the leading voices, and I intend to always be a leading voice on gun violence prevention. I always, rib my colleagues and say, I am like that little nagging fly that flies around your head and will never, ever let you forget that every single day that we do not pass gun safety policy in this country, more and more people continue to die. And yes, those are even your friends and, people in your community and your loved ones. So since we've been in Washington, federal background checks for all gun sales and also closing the Charleston loophole, those two pieces of legislation, I am a lead sponsor of those bills, have both passed in the 116th Congress. They both have passed in the 117th Congress, but they're again getting them past the Senate. And Mitch McConnell has been the problem. So I don't need to go into that because everyone knows what's been happening there. But I will tell you of recent, because of all the horrific cases that we've seen over and over and over again with gun violence, in particular with people of color. There are now about 20 of our Senate Republicans that are willing to talk, which is definitely, it's incredible that they are willing to talk. We may end up having to make some consensus, some compromise for federal background checks just to be able to get something passed. I've been working very closely with Senator Chris Murphy, of course, been working with the Senate Republicans. I cannot promise you that will happen, but there is some movement there. We might be able to make some inroads there with passing federal background checks, but it won't be the legislation as it stands now. It will be amended. There is not really much of a chance at this point for closing the Charleston loophole, which is the enhanced background check. I have been working really, really very closely. In particular, we talk about what is happening when people are in crisis. A lot of these tragedies that we see, mass murders, people are actually in crisis at that time. They have access to firearms, they own firearms. And so my legislation, the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act, that is now the legislation that has become an executive order by President Biden. If you recall, a few weeks ago in the Rose Garden, I was actually on vacation. One vacation I'd been able to get in a year and a half. And I had to physically come back from my vacation because I'd been called by the White House, called by President Biden to come in because he has placed in order as an executive order my bill, the red flag bill. And so what he's going to actually be doing is giving states the ability to help them enact this legislation should they choose to. He has tasked the Department of Justice with creating the platforms and the means by which people will be able to enact this legislation state by state by state. So this is movement. Now, it's not movement the way we want. We want this legislation to pass into law. That's the most constructive and permanent way to do it. But at this point, because we don't generally get the consensus of the Republican Senate, this is an executive order. And so I'm really, really grateful for that, because when people are exhibiting signs of crisis and they have access to guns or firearms, this will enable the family along with law enforcement, to go to the court and petition the court to have those guns taken from that individual up to a year, as long as they're exhibiting signs of crisis. And then if it's determined at a year, up to a year, that this individual has help, they're no longer in crisis, then they'll have to pass a federal background check in order to get those arms returned to them. So this is movement, and this is something very, very positive. But there again, it is not permanent. It's only an executive order as long as the president is the president. And we continue to work on, legislation. Of course, we've seen all of the heinous crimes that we've had in the AAPI community as of recent. And so I have co-sponsored, as many of my colleagues have, we've co-sponsored the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which makes the Department of Justice expedite the review of hate crimes that have been motivated by COVID-19. Also, I have co-sponsored, and all of us have passed the No Hate Act, which would provide grants to state and local law enforcement to do more to address hate crimes. And then, so we're working really, really closely now with the Republican Senate, but there again, most of this work is being done by the House Democrats, and we're just hoping to be able to get more support with the Republican Senate. But we're working as fast, as expediently as we possibly can, because we want to save as many lives and really reduce the number of hate crimes that we see, really working as hard as we can to keep our people, our communities safe, and a sense of democracy again.
Well, thank you, Lucy. Can everybody hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I want to say thank you, Congresswoman Lucy McBath. At this time, we can take some questions. If anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. We will look on the screen and see if we see your hand up. Or is there someone monitoring the chat room to see if there are any questions? Because I see a lot of stuff going on in the chat.
Question to start off with, Danielle. Congresswoman Lucy, talk to us about the de-escalation effort. We're really dedicated to having the Congress pass a bill for de-escalation training so that we can get families, school teachers, health professionals, young people trained in the art of de-escalation. Because we know that when these situations happen, if the people involved know how to calm down and de-escalate, or if there's a third party there and they can intervene, they can make a difference. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Because there has been a bill that was presented for the de-escalation of violence by Congresswoman Gwen Moore, and we kind of helped write that bill. And we would like to see it go forward. So please, any advice or thoughts you have would be greatly appreciated.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a wonderful piece of legislation that Representative Morris put forth, but there again, we need teeth behind it. We definitely do. And so as we've always said, and what I recognized even as just an advocate, as a mobilizer and an organizer, when I would be speaking to individuals that are now my colleagues, there again, they would always say, we don't hear from people that believe in your legislation. We don't hear from people that are thinking like you. If you say that they agree with you, if you say that there are numbers of people that want this legislation passed, we're not hearing from them. So just as we have done, to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to mobilize and organize to put our elected officials in office, to put a president and a vice president in office, we have to do the same thing when we're trying to support any member of Congress or any member in a state legislature that has legislation that is really meaningful in really helping to de-escalate violence, reduce violence. We have to put our teeth behind it, which means we have to be willing to mobilize and organize behind that individual and really, really put some teeth in our efforts to making, whether it's a state legislator or your federal legislator, making them understand and know that this is a really critical and important piece of legislation that you expect them to take seriously. And that means that's a lot of phone banking, not only one time. That means it's a concerted effort of phone banking every single week. where you're tying up their phone lines and they can expect that you're going to be doing so. It is bombarding them with emails and letters, petitions. It is when they are in their state and local offices. It means going by, well, we can't do that now because of COVID, but demanding that they have, demanding that you have a presence with them. Because oftentimes, and I have to be honest with you, sometimes elected officials kind of just forget who they represent. They forget, how they got to Washington. They forget that they should be listening to the voices of their constituents. And so we have to remind them, you have to remind us that we serve you. You have to remind us that we're accountable to you. And by doing that, that means that you have to organize behind that legislator, behind that piece of legislation, to let elected officials know that you mean business and that they're accountable to you.
Should we focus on the Republicans or the Democrats?
Republicans. You don't have to worry about the Democrats. We're all on the same page. I mean, we're all pretty much, despite what you might hear, we are not fractured. We are moving together, unified, because we know how much is at stake. We know that. And so we continue to work together, but it's just making sure that our Republican colleagues, you've got to put pressure on them. You have to place pressure on them. And yes, it's a sense of threatening them, in a sense of saying, we're watching you, we're paying attention, and we're going to remember in November. We're going to find candidates that will stand up to protect us, to keep us safe. We will find those candidates and we'll put them before you, because that's the very same thing I ended up having to say to one of my colleagues now that I sit with on Judiciary. I remember I was at one of the hearings on the Hill, and I remember it was a committee bill markup, and I watched over and over and over again as the Republicans said no, 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 no to every gun safety amendment. And I remember as I was leaving the committee bill markup, one of who's now my colleagues, Republican colleague, came running out the door after me. Mrs. McBath, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, and so sorry about, your son, and I can't even imagine. And I said, well, sir, thank you so much. I appreciate your sentiments. I really do. But I have to be honest with you, and I mean no disrespect, but I sat here for 4 hours and watch you time and time and time again vote against a pivotal piece of legislation that would protect other children like my son. So I'm sorry to tell you, but I don't believe what you tell me. And I'm out here amassing a whole army of men, women, and families that we are going to make sure that we hold you accountable to keeping us safe. And I'm telling you, we will remember this in November. And then that's when I ran, and me and others like me were able to take those seats in 2018. So holding them accountable. Also, I didn't mention too, and it's two extremely important pieces of legislation that we've also passed are the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, holding law enforcement accountable, making sure that we are, making sure that there's transparency, making sure that, and I do want to preface that, a lot of law enforcement, not all are bad. There are a lot of really good law enforcement, communities in the country. And we want all of them to represent that. We want all of them to be their best. But there again, making sure, even with that legislation, holding law enforcement accountable, making sure that we are investing in their ability to have persons there with them on the beat that can de-escalate the violence that our law enforcement is facing. And so, law enforcement, they are not equipped to deal with people emotionally or behaviorally. They're not trained to do that. So making sure that we're investing in their ability to be able to do so that they are building trust with the community that they serve. They also need to look like the community that they serve. But it is a matter of building trust with the community and also making sure that the community respects them as well. And that's only in terms of building trust. Also, we've passed, and this was my piece of legislation along with Frederica Wilson, Hakeem Jeffries, and also Cedric Richmond. It's the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. And under that commission, we're doing a great deal. We will be doing a great deal of study. And this report every single year will go to the president's desk. And we'll actually be determining all of those determinants that prevent young Black men and boys across the country from being successful. And of course, in that also, we talk about de-escalation of violence for them as well, in ways that we'll be, doing that. So there are a lot of good things that we are doing, but we can't do it all on our own. It takes the concerted effort and voices and pressure from everyday citizens, making their voices heard, to put pressure on federal legislators, state and local, to get things done.
Thank you. I
Very
think
good.
with that, I know you're going to ask give another question, Dr. Myers, but I was in a meeting, we were talking to some representatives in Annapolis, and one of the things I'd said that would be a good argument with that is because of the relationship when you talk about community policing and a relationship with Black and brown individuals and with the police, and how we've seen how they interact with other individuals and how it's different. So this would be a very vital piece of legislation because it will also train individuals. So instead of you calling the police because people are scared to call law enforcement because sometimes they get hurt or harmed or either shot. So if we are able to train one another, then we can de-escalate these situations prior to having to call the police officers. And again, I think a letter, maybe we'll send something out like a letter writing campaign to a lot of these different legislators, letting them know how we feel in our communities. That might be do like a mass letter and, I guess change it according to the different states. But thank you so much. And you have another question, Dr. Myers?
Well, there's a question in the chat room that I'll read. Here's a question. Are there any Democrats in conservative districts that are not supporting the bill that you developed? I guess they're talking, I don't know if she's talking about the de-escalation bill or bills that you're working on, Madam Congresswoman, but are there any Democrats in conservative districts that are not supporting the bill that you developed and that President Biden signed?
The red flag bill, and the one that's become an executive order. Not that I am aware of. The general consensus is that, this is a very vital piece of legislation. I will tell you though, is that while there are a few, and those few are people like me that come from districts where we are sitting in seats that were once red. And those districts are districts that are more rural districts, where there are more gun owners, and where there are more hunters. Those are those individuals, and there are just a few. Those are the ones that are really kind of concerned about what this looks like, because they come from districts where there are a lot of people that are gun owners and gun enthusiasts. And most of them are frontliners, like me, a frontliner. None of them are people of color, but these are all people that represent somewhat rural districts.
Well, what I want to say, thank you so much, Councilwoman Lucy McBath. We are going to end this because I know you have another scheduled appointment. And what we're going to do is ask everyone who has questions to put your questions in the chat. We make sure that we'll get the questions to Councilwoman McBath, and we will also make sure that they get your information for donations, for donating to your campaign as well. We did have a little chat before you came on talking about that importance, so we will elaborate on that. So Dr. Myers, did you have anything else you want to say? And thank you so much for attending.
We know that you're kind of tight, Madam Congresswoman, but do you have time for one or two more questions?
I think she actually has somewhere that should have been like almost 5 minutes ago. And I got that message. So we're going to go ahead and let her go. And we're going to take the questions like that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on board. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And ladies, continue to do the great work that you're doing. Every effort really, really, really counts. It really does.
Thank you. And thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, ladies. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Well, for the ladies who are on here, we can continue having this conversation if you wish.
Yes.
Now, she suggested that we should start a campaign with the Republicans to try to get them to support our de-escalation bill and other important gun safety bills. What do you guys think?
Good evening. It's Kim Joseph in South Florida. I would agree that we need to start a campaign. I'm seeing a need for de-escalation techniques with school police on school campuses right now. And that is, there was a recent incident that had the school police gotten there before someone else, we would have had an on-campus incident of a child being shot, which that was actually in a mental health crisis because that officer, that's supposedly how they're trained. I can't speak to, they call them SROs here, school resource officers. I cannot speak to their actual training, but I know in my job over the past 20 years of working with students at risk alternative ed, and in the DJJ populations, I've seen a lot of school police escalate situations. So this is something that we need to trickle down, if to use that term. So I would definitely agree that a campaign is needed.
Okay. Mhm.
But I'm thinking that's really a school district issue. I don't know that that's a Democrat or Republican issue, really. I think that that's something that really needs to be addressed with school boards,
So what I will say to that, we had an officer, one of a couple of our officers that we spoke with last week on a couple of meetings, and they are doing some special training with the SRO officers. But and although you would talk to the school board, it is also an issue with your local law enforcement department as well, and building community, building relationships. It's the same as if they would go out to anyone that they would go to and pick out on the street and see, there are different triggers that you have with kids. Sometimes you may want to make sure you have the social worker, the local social worker, or someone who's trained on board with them as well when they speak to them. But we can also have, it's a couple of individuals, and one of them, Dr. Moss, Captain Lilly, he spoke on that last week with some things that they're doing and working on that to change the relationship and how the SRO officers handle things at the school level, at the educational level.
Shanas Piles, she has a question.
Okay, so what has concerned me for years, because I work as a substitute teacher in the DeKalb County schools here in Georgia, but I've also been a substitute teacher in the Illinois schools as well. And what came on the television the past couple of days is we've been watching a principal in Miami paddle a child, since we're talking about de-escalation and violence, paddle a child, and the mother stood there and watched the principal do that because she felt it was nothing she could do. But she did videotape the incident, and she, after she left the meeting, she was able to get that video in the hands where all of us could see it. I don't know if any of you saw that, but that showed up on our televisions. And so this has concerned me for years, because they also the news commentator talked about the number of states who still believe in corporal punishment. So if we have principals and administrators and teachers still doing this to our children, how can we, it's sort of like hypocritical to me, because we don't want the police to treat our children this way, but we're still treating we don't want the police to treat people this way, but we're still treating our children this way in schools. So so this is where the fine lines concern me, because we're still doing some of the same things, but we want to make the changes for these violent acts that are going on. That is violent to me, while we're still beating and whooping on the children. 3 paddles, some people don't see that as beating on them, but the way that principal was hitting that child, to me, that was like a beat down to me. So, I don't know what we do about these kinds of things.
Any comments or observations?
I will just say that was not Miami. I don't want to derail us or take us too far off topic. That was not Miami. It was actually a Central Florida area, which tends to be somewhat conservative. There are a very small number of school districts and districts that actually allow corporal punishment. But my comment as far as a campaign, I support the idea of a campaign to promote de-escalation skills and de-escalation techniques. And if I think we do that at the legislative level, it would be something that we can take and also promote at a local level. Fortunately, here in Palm Beach County, we have not seen too many police officers. We have mental health that goes out in our area on certain calls with the police. So we've been able to avoid some possible confrontations by the police that would have ended up in a more negative result. But again, we definitely need to bring attention to the need for retraining of officers, de-escalation, and dealing with implicit bias. And I will thank you, ladies. I do have to step away, as well as I have another engagement for 8 o'clock. It's been a wonderful experience, and I'm glad I've been able to join. Thank you, Dr. Myers, for inviting me. And I hope to see you all again.
Well, we're glad to see you, Dr. Joseph. And for those of you who are educators, this is an opportunity during the week of nonviolence in October. Put together some workshops on educators and de-escalation. Put together something for the school boards. We need leadership to step up. If we need to make this a school board issue, okay, let's make it a school board issue. But that requires contacting the school boards and getting the word out there and having it work. We've got to do more than just talk to each other. Because this stuff is serious. Every day, it's another crisis.
You make a great point, Dr. Myers. And I was looking at something that Sora Gloria Cooper Blue wrote in the chat. And that was what I was thinking. We have our week of nonviolence in October, the second week of October. And one of the things I want us to do here in Maryland and Baltimore is to have some of these workshops and focus on de-escalation. Like Congresswoman McBath was saying, some people were saying it didn't look like too many people were interested. So in addition to us doing the letters, we can also partner with Moms Demand Action. We can talk to individuals with the League of Women Voters, partner with these different groups and organizations, and even with the Divine Nine, and talk more about that and let them know why it's important for us to have de-escalation. With that point I brought up before, how, the argument that sometimes we don't want to call the officers, because you can call the officer, and then there are instances that we see on social media where the person who called is the one who got shot and killed, as opposed to them going to the individual who was actually the perpetrator. So maybe we do need to have some of these town halls and these forums and have some of the speakers come in and speak to them as well as some of the officers, because I've talked to some of the officers who feel the same way as a lot of us do. And sometimes some of their hands are tied with saying what they actually really want to say. So I think it's important for all of us to get together with our different local organizations, and then we can all team up. So what you guys can do is what Dr. Myers was saying in the beginning of this conversation is go to our website with Black Women for Positive Change and sign up to be a member. And then that's a way for you to spearhead and get your group together in your prospective city or state and think of ways that we can change this culture of violence, because right now, that's what we're dealing with more than anything. The culture of violence is just crazy. And then although some of us are out here working and we're doing our best and we're great and we're strong, it still is a task for us mentally to witness all of this and see all of this on a regular basis. I mean, when I see someone's child going through something, I feel as if it was my own child. We can no longer tell our kids to keep their hand on the steering wheel no more, or put your hand up, because everyone is at danger. So let's just get together, use our different perspective, organizations, groups, and think of what we can do during this week of the culture of violence. Please visit our website. Dr. Myers is going to give all of that to you again, because I don't have it in front of me. And then we look forward to having you all join us in helping to make this world a better place by all of us changing the culture of violence, one person, one individual, one organization at a time.
It's good to see Barbara Riley and Nikki McDonough on. They're both with Moms Demand Action. So welcome. And we can partner together on these things. Reverend Riley?
Yeah, well, right, we've always done that. So yeah, we would definitely look forward to that for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question that I just hope that will help me with my own thinking, because I don't like to be a hypocrite and say one thing and think another. Just about corporate punishment. I grew up in Catholic schools, and we were always spanked when we didn't have our reports on time. It gave us a respect for being timely and complete. I sent my son to boarding school, Pineywood boarding school, where one of Kathy Hughes' relatives started. And I was happy they spanked him, because as a single mother, I was having problems with raising him to be the man I wanted him to be. So, I mean, is this the thinking of everyone, that we shouldn't have our kids spanked? Is that, because I want to know, because, I want to know, I mean, just for my own well-being, because I think sometimes children should be spanked, but spanked equally. I wouldn't want my child to be spanked and knowing that maybe she's being hit because she's a person of color. So, but is that the thinking? We should not have our children spanked? I just like to know.
Any educators want to speak up on that?
I want to speak up on that because
I
I
would like
actually was
to.
talking about it. It is mine that they should not be spanked. Okay, I don't. I'm just telling my opinion.
Okay, and then
Okay.
Gloria Cooper, you have a comment?
Gloria Cooper, Gloria, you want to say something?
You have to unmute.
Yes, as a parent and an educator, I don't agree with corporal punishment, spanking in any right. As a teacher, I would not want to put my hands on another person's child. And as a parent, I wouldn't want anyone to put their hand on my child, because with people having so many other personal issues, you don't want them to take out any kind of extra anger or any other mental issues that they may be going through out on a child. And so I don't think that there's so many other forms of discipline that you can give to a child. A lot of children just need structure, they need rules, they need parameters and consequences, and it doesn't have to deal with putting your hands on any child, whether it be a child of color or non-color. No child should be ever spanked, in my opinion, by an adult, an administrator, or anyone.
Well, your opinions help me formulate my opinions, so I appreciate that.
Gloria, you also had some comment about Angus King in Massachusetts, Joe Manchin, West Virginia. Would you share with us what you posted in the chat room?
Sure. So as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, along with Soror Congresswoman McBath and Soror Danielle Winky Smith, we just attended, every year we do something called Delta Days at the nation's capital. We also do it at the United Nations. And then we also do it at our local level in Annapolis and at City Hall. And so I walked away with so much information. It was almost overwhelming how much information that they provided us. But my sorority, we actually have 7 initiatives that we're going to be working on. And we're starting with doing something simple as far as writing letters. So they gave us form letters that we could send out, flooding different congresswomen, men, and the senators. And those 5 senators' names that I put in the chat, those are 5 Democratic senators that just happen to be in conservative districts that are not on board with some of the regulations when it comes to the gun laws. So that was one thing that I took to heart, because I've heard so many stories like Congresswoman McBath and Trayvon Martin, and just all of the senseless gun violence against children. And it really struck me when Congress didn't move when the shooting happened at the elementary school, and all those little kindergartner and first graders were killed, and their teachers trying to shield their students with their bodies. And then again in Parkland, Florida, our students and our teachers should not feel like we have to carry guns, or that we have to have all these type of restrictions when we only want to teach. I don't want to have to worry about carrying a gun, but personally, I have taken gun classes just to feel not as afraid, like, and we have to go through these trainings where we do active gun shooter drills, like just like a fire drill. So all of these things are like playing on not just adult psyche, but also children's psyche. So we have to like what we're doing is just trying to start a letter writing campaign to try to get some of these senators who are in conservative districts, whether they're Democrat, and then all of the Republicans who are not supporting it in the NRA, and just bombarding them like Smith said, and Congresswoman McBath. We have to, like, as starting at the kitchen table, having these conversations with not just people who like ourselves are in agreement, but other people who are not in agreement, and having conversations with them and asking them to get on board to just support something sensible like a background check. It should, you shouldn't have to, you should have a license to carry. We're not trying to take your gun, but you should have to go through the same type of strenuous background check. Like to get your driver's license, I have to wait to get it in the mail, and it takes 5 days or longer. Why can someone go into a gun shop and buy a gun, and get their gun the same day? Like there's no checks going on, no checks and balances. And that's why we have, some of these lone wolf young men who have problems with, mental health, and they get to walk away with their lives, but they've taken the lives of, regular human beings out at the supermarket or at the movies. And that is really disturbing to me. So that's where I'm kind of focusing my efforts.
Thank you. Thank you, Sora Gloria.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Miss Mickey.
Yeah, I think though that this is very frightening to me, but I think we also need to recognize that in the past year, legal gun sales have just like gone through the roof. I mean, like locally here in Pittsburgh, they've done news story after news story about gun shop owners actually running out of guns and ammunition because of the run on people buying them. So, as much as it makes me fearful to say this, and I know Moms Demand Action, especially in the more rural counties, actually reach out to gun owners to, kind of get them involved, because I do believe most gun owners are sane and are in favor of practical, realistic gun violence prevention, like universal background checks and all of that, but somehow we overlook them. And I fear that now it's become, okay, they're the enemy and we're the enemy to them, And because there's so many of them out there now with hundreds of millions of guns out there, I'm wondering if, we might not want to make an effort to reach out to gun owners, although it scares the poo-poo out of me. It really does, but yeah.
Right, Nikki. There's no point in us talking to ourselves. We have to be willing to talk to people who think differently than we do. So I agree with you. And I think it would be amazing to have some type of workshop, if not with the NRA, then with one of these gun ownership groups, however you find them. There are gun ownership groups that are training people all over the country. Maybe there's some association of gun training or something. I don't know what they're
doing. Dr. Mad, those paramilitary people are scary. I would not want them to be involved in any discussions. But just, your average everyday gun owner that feels they have to have a gun for protection, or likes to go hunting or whatever,
Well, what I will say, Miss Mickey, Miss McDonough, you are right. I mean, we've even had some threats with our school board here in Baltimore County. There have been QAnon and MAGA individuals who have threatened the lives of some of our school board members. And so, and that's because there are those of us who stood up at these school board meetings and spoke out. I've even had people call me and say, look, you can't say anything. You have to do everything under the auspice of this national group or that group, because when you say something, then the next thing you know, they talk to their friends, you're on the news, they are actually showing your address and where you live. So a lot of people are afraid to speak up and that's why we have to be strategic. And that's how we have to do it under the auspice of our organizations. So that's a whole nother issue. One of the reasons why the NRA has ran out of guns and firearms is because a lot of people of color have, Black and brown individuals have just been scared, nervous out of their wits because of what's going on. So they have been buying the guns and the arms just for protection to take care of themselves. And I can't tell you how many of my constituents and family and friends are like, look, we went and bought us something, we taking classes. You know, people don't even want to stand out and sign wave and do things to get people to vote anymore, because people, we're not hearing everything in the news, but people are just being picked off and shot and abducted. So there's a lot of things that are going on that people are talking about at the water coolers and the kitchen tables that are reasons why people are scared to speak out in the open.
We try to stay within about our hour, so we can go a
Are
few
we?
more minutes, but let me just mention that Jan Perry, our chair of social action, is inviting a group called Integrity First for America. We're going to have a session like this in a few weeks where these people, Jan, you're probably best to give the summary, but they're filing lawsuits against the Charlottesville insurrection.
Neo-Nazis.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Jan. Tell them about the group that's going to make the presentation in a few weeks.
Well, it's a legal advocacy group filed on behalf of several plaintiffs who were present that day in Charlottesville when that woman was hit by a car, dragged, and then died. But they're filing a lawsuit that I think is very similar to the one that Klan Watch did years ago, where they were able to seize the assets of the Ku Klux Klan and basically shut them down as we know it. And so I was on a briefing with them through another group and thought it would be a very good and interesting idea for them to come and brief us.
No, that is amazing. You know what? Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, of course.
And hi, you look amazing. One thing I wanted to say, I noticed someone put in the chat, you guys, and I just want us to be cognizant of this. They said Mark Kelly is listed as one of the politicians who is not supportive of the gun violence legislation. Can you elaborate? He is married to Gabby Gifford, and I have heard him many times speak supporting it. And what I want to say to that, I have sat in on meetings. Sometimes you want to go look and see what some of your representatives are doing and how they are voting, because there are several Democratic representatives who live in some of these districts who are not supporting some of these bills. And I've sat on some of these meetings and listened to them in these Annapolis briefings that we've had. And I was like, wow, no wonder we can't get things done sometimes, because the people that we vote for, that we think are speaking for us and supportive, are voting on the other side. And I just felt like it's such a personal issue. And that's what I like about Cheney. Cheney is willing to lose her seat to be a patriot and to tell the truth and say what's right. Well, we have so many people out here who are self-serving.
I can add to that because I actually heard Mark Kelly speak here in Los Angeles, and he had the former congresswoman with him, and they are from Arizona, and it's a open carry state. And now don't quote me on this, but I remember them saying something like they do support the right to bear arms. They do support the Second Amendment. They support what you call sensible or reasonable gun control legislation. He was doing most of the speaking because she doesn't speak a lot. She speaks a little, but not a lot. But that's what I recall from that evening.
Okay.
So,
And I'm just gonna chime in real quick. I was the one that wrote the senator's name. Although his wife Gabby Gifford was shot in the head during a speaking engagement by someone who did not agree with her politics, and although they are advocates of sensible gun rights, he is unfortunately still in a district in Arizona, along with Senator Kirsten Sinema of Arizona. They're in a state that is, they have open carry, right to conceal and carry, all of those different laws. So unfortunately, although he speaks in agreement with some of the things that we want for sensible gun regulation, he's in a state that doesn't. And of course, he's, it's kind of like talking out the both sides of your neck. Like he's saying one thing, but then voting another way, like Sora Smith said. So we just have to, like she said, not just listen to their words, but actually go in and look at their voting record. And those 5 senators that I put in are the 5 Democratic senators that are in conservative districts that are fighting the gun laws. in addition to all of the Republicans. So if you start your letter writing campaign, and don't be afraid to be as voiceful with the people who disagree with us, because talking to ourselves, we are okay to talk amongst ourselves. It's the other people, the other side, that we have to kind of convince, or at least listen to them and have them listen to us.
Now, is that Gloria talking? Gloria Cooper?
Yes,
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, Gloria, we really need to get you involved. We need to get you to sign up.
Oh, I'm already on it, Dr. Myers.
Okay,
Be on it.
a lot of comments and a lot of insights. That's really great. Well, we're kind of moving towards winding down. If anyone else, Dr. Shirley McClellan, she has a comment. You want to make your comment?
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me just say thank you so much for an amazing evening. I have certainly enjoyed the presentation, and especially that by Congresswoman. Had the great opportunity of meeting her when I ran for Congress here in District 1, Tyler, Texas. But I wanted to make mention a couple of things. Number one is in 1977, we have to remember that we sometimes have to get to the Supreme Court and change things, because that Ingram versus Wright, that was a bill that was brought into the Constitution to make corporal punishment a law. And so we have 19 states, to include my state, the state of Texas, who actually uses corporal punishment. So we have to go all the way to the Supreme Court and get these things changed in order for that to take place. So I wanted to mention that. And then, of course, I'm retired United States Army officer. I believe I own weapons. I know how to use M16 and all of those things. But what I said when I came home from the war, that I no longer wanted to have to protect myself. Unfortunately, I still have to. If somebody tried to break into my home, obviously I was going to protect my home, but I didn't want to have to do that in the streets. So anytime you talk about de-escalation or anything in Texas, in particular in East Texas, where I live, talking about anything in regards to the police officers, they look at that as you're trying to take away or defund the police officers. So we have a lot of work that we have to do, and I'm on board to do anything that I can do from right here in Tyler, Texas, as a city council member, to help to make sure that our children are taken care of first. Thank you, ladies, very much for that opportunity.
Good. Well, please keep in touch with us, sign up, become a part of the Week of Nonviolence. We need you. It's not about our organization. It's about the safety of everyone. We're just—
Yes, and make sure you put your information in the text. Do we have our information, Dr. Myers?
No, I don't. I don't have it.
I did put my email address in there, CFN Healthy Living, I'm medical, so that's in the chat, but I'll put everything else, my mailing address and all of that here in Tyler, if you would like to have that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Reverend Reynolds, we want to ask you to pray us out. And ladies, we invite you to come back and join us for our next session. And hopefully you're on one of the lists and you'll get the next email. Okay, Reverend Reynolds.
Can I ask this one question before we start? I just want to make sure, is our chat, because some people put their information in there, is it going to be saved or copied?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Good.
And also let me thank Maria Jones, who's our technology specialist. We have a wonderful behind the scenes person who makes everything happen. So thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria.
Reverend Reynolds, you have to unmute. Unmute.
There we go.
Okay. Zoom gives you the opportunity to look at people. And as I was looking at some of you, I just saw heroes. I just saw prayer warriors. I just saw women of great courage. I just saw women who are leaders, not only in communities, but in their homes and the nation. And I just thank God for you. And I thank God that you have brought us together at a time such as this, when we need leadership. And Lord, you have answered our call right here on this line, looking in your faces, God. I see hope rising. I see change coming. I see love conquering hate. Lord God, I see courage, God, under fire. And so, Lord God, I ask you to give us the strength. Lord, don't let us get weary in well-doing. Lord, keep the motivation, Lord. Keep the fire going. Keep the words shut up in our bones, God, that we've got to talk, not to ourselves, but to each other, Lord God. We thank you, God, for our leaders here of this organization and what organization you represent, because together we are just one organization, women of God and of great courage, doing a great thing for the Lord. So I ask the Lord to bless you in your personal homes, in your personal triumphs, that whatever it is that you're going through, that you know that the Lord will lead you and he will never fail. So keep praying, keep fighting, because the time is now for women to lead with God as our Savior. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate your participation. For those of you who don't know, our group is composed of women, good brothers like Reverend JJ, women from all kinds of backgrounds and nationalities and faiths. We have Buddhists, Christians, Jews, Muslims across the board. And so we really feel strongly about reaching out and trying to demonstrate what we think America should be. We also have an intergenerational linkage that is so exciting. We've just created a Gen Z connection where we have kids ages 14 to 25 who are part of our network, and they're so excited and we're excited to have them. So by being a part of our group, there's a lot of different niches that you can choose. You can deal with the Congress, you can deal with the Gen Zs, you can deal with faith leaders, business executives like our Black Wall Street Project, all kinds of stuff. So please sign up, come on board. Let's get busy. We got to make this thing happen. Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you,
Happy
Dan.
Mother's
Happy
Day.
Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's
Happy
Day,
Mother's
everyone.
Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Goodbye.